Orientalism sometimes can feel like a little bit of too big of an idea for us, especially as we're starting out the semester. We're kind of getting used to, different thoughts that could control the literary movements. And as 21st century post-colonial readers, we can look back on Orientalism as something very negative, and I'm not saying it's not, very negative, and it's hard to disconnect ourselves. So I wanted to make this video for you guys to kind of give you an idea of how Orientalism began and where we should kind of put our mindset. So we want to, for this week, in a way, disengage ourselves as 21st century readers and try to put ourselves into the mindset of late 18th century readers and see how it would have been coming across to them, and then still analyze it from where we are, but let's also put ourselves into that mindset. So what is the Orient, or what is Orientalism? That's a very nebulous term and idea, because what they ended up doing was combining regions that are vastly different in their geographical locations, their religions, their society, their culture, how they worked, all their values. Very different regions were just into one, the Orient, the East. So there's no great definition of what the Orient was, and we can't really make one single picture of it, which some of the authors at the time took advantage of that and really played up the differences, and both idealized and abused the Orient. So we can idealize that harems can be sensual and beautiful pleasures, but we're also going to make it look like it's a cruel world of sex slavery and women had no autonomy and had no rights. So very much so juxtaposed images going on and being embraced in a way that makes it hard to put like a firm definition of what's going on. However, what motivates the push for the Orient, for distinguishing them, is that we are not other. And so what this means is that we as the West, we as England, we as Western Europe are rational, we're disciplined, we're moderate, we're level-headed, and the East, or the other, so anything that is not us, is emotional, self-indulgent, extremist, mystical, and it could keep going on and on. So this is a time period where you really see an embrace of we as a home culture are this, and we're superior to anything that does not fit our home culture. So other could be the Orient, other could be a different gender, other could be a different language, a different religion. So that's something to keep in your mind, not just in relation to the Orient. It is a European invention, according to Edward Said, who's like the leading expert on Orientalism. The Europeans create Orientalism, and it's a creative body of theory and practice that is based on truth, based on studies, based on their investments, but also filled with lies or twisting of things to achieve their purposes. It does have a political power to it, and by taking ideas that have existed since about the time of the ancient Greeks, and really formalizing it, it gave political powers their starting their colonialism, and made it easier to explain their power, the restructuring, the domination, the leadership going on. We do have two kind of forms of Orientalism. You have an academic Orientalism, which is where we're just looking to develop organized knowledge about the Orient. But then we also have a literary genre where Europeans could imagine how the Orient was in a cultural space and define the Orient as everything not what they were, and use it as a way to explore different subject matters and what identity meant. I do want to share this long quote from Said because I think it's important. And I'm going to let you pause here to read it. But we do look at the Orient as both a cultural and political fact, because you can see in this that it is a geopolitical awareness with a certain will and intention of controlling somebody. So go ahead and take a quick pause and read through this. Okay, so now that we're back, I want to give you some historical context. So in 1704, the Arabian Nights Entertainment, or 1001 Arabian Nights, the Tale of Scheherazade, was translated into French, and then in 1706 it's translated into English, and this is wildly popular. So not only do we have that early 18th century introduction to these stories from the Orient, we also have some political things happening as well. So the Mughal domination of the Indian subcontinent starts to lessen, and so the East India Company at this time, that is run by private investors, not the government, is like, yes, we're going to take over this power. The Ottoman Empire is crumbling. We're explaining colonialism as a European group. And the Chinese Empire is starting to become exploited by the smuggling of opiates by the East Indian Company and other groups through China. But there's some other big events that happen as well that give more and more power to the British in this area. So in 1756, you have an event called the Black Hole of Calcutta. A new ruler, Siraj Uddaula, takes over Calcutta, which we call the English renamed to Calcutta. Puts 100 Europeans and some others into a prison that was only meant to hold just a few people. So obviously lots of people die. There's really bad treatments. And while the United Kingdom and other European nations also did just as awful things, this gets really played up as, oh my gosh, these people are awful. Clearly we have to civilize them. And so the Black Hole of Calcutta is used as propaganda to really push for political domination. You also have the Battle of Plassey in 1757, in which the East India Company helps lead a battle against Siraj Uddaula and defeats him. And so now the East India Company really establishes their power in this area. However, by 1784, the East India Company has become so corrupt and so wild. The British government institutes the East India Act, the East India Company Act, and it is now run by 5 government-appointed councilmen, and the Governor General of the area is also in control. And eventually, the British government will just completely take over. At first, they're like, "This is how it's going to be ruled," but you guys are still doing your thing. And then eventually, by the 1800s, they are completely controlling it. So all these things are happening politically that also lead to this idea of we have to control this area. So there's a couple different approaches to Orientalism. First is Montesquieu. He's a French philosopher. Basically, he makes the Orient sound like it's a very fearful area. There's no civil liberties. It's a nightmare territory of the mind in which all of the worst human impulses govern, that's a quote from your Norton Anthology. So he really pushes the idea that tyranny and the Orient, or tyranny and the East, are just connected. So clearly colonialism is a good thing because we're taking people out of these horrible situations and bringing them up into better areas. And it really helps push the belief that the British can't benefit from learning from the Hindu and Islamic cultures, and we really just have to fix them. So that's one view. The East India Company, while they did want power, they also support the idea of furthering knowledge and understanding of these different regions and cultures, because they knew that would help them better control where they are. But they do support different people in true scholarly effort. So example, James Rennell, they support him in his mapping of Bengal in the area. So in 1779, the Bengal Atlas is published, and it's like the best map of the area for a long time. In 1785, they supported the first English translation of the Bhagavad Gita. So that's a big Hindu text that is now in English for people to access. And you also have people like Sir William Jones, who is a linguist and company judge, who founded the Asiatic Society and the Asiatic Research Journal. And he really was all about being accurate, still beautiful, but accurate in our knowledge, and that the Orient is good to study, not just a dream or makeup on. And here's, true information about the religion, the language, and literature, architecture, culture, and geography of this area. So there's different viewpoints going on, but they are all leading into this idea of one kind of like Orient. So what literary impact does this have? The news stories give us a break from traditional subject matter. We're no longer just being biblical focused. We can branch out. The Romantics already were breaking with, to go back to the past or other areas away from the United Kingdom to examine their identity, and they're fascinated with the idea of the other and the exotic. This is a period of armchair tourism, so people are very curious about touring and learning about other cultures from the safety of their homes. We use these writings to support colonialism, but also just let our imagination run wild. However, all these pieces of writing does end up leaving Britain thinking that the East is just a place of startling brutality, rampant eroticism, and political backwardness, which we know is a bad belief and not true at all. So, I just want to briefly end with some information about how Orientalism has left an impact, because these same cliches and stereotypes, these same justifications for power and violence still control and impact societies today, and we see that in modern politics all around the world. All governments taking over an area have the idea of like other versus us and why we are better and helping these others. But the electronic and postmodern world is still reinforcing these stereotypes, according to Said. And it's important that we really study literature so that we can kind of see how we've gotten here and fully understand it. Because we really just look at these time-worn stereotypes that show the Orient as violent, overly sexualized, comically dull-witted, or otherwise exotic, and we just accept that at face value at times when we know that's not true. And while we are moving away from that some, it is important to recognize that what started in the Romantic period is still really impacting the way we view things today.